But you're in for a treat today. About 3 years ago, we needed a vendor to come in and do some training for one of our authoring tools. So my former coworker at the time, he says, I have a great friend. She can do this. She can do it. I mean, just let me call her. Let me find out. Oh my goodness, he never lied. Because ever since then, we've been kind of like, hooked up at the hip, so to speak. Because she's come back and done several training seminars for us, and as well as individuals in LOC, and helping us with our learning, not our learning management system, but our authoring tools. Welcome, Lisa.
We all need friends like Toya, right? What a nice way to start the day. Thank you. Thank you very much, and good morning. And what a nice day, huh? I'm sorry we're not all outside in the atrium or something having this discussion. Well, I have to say I was thrilled to be invited to this symposium, but even more excited because it was with a group of professional project managers. And while my title is CEO and what our company does is training and performance support, at heart, I'm really a project manager. There's nothing more exciting to me than, creating that plan and working the plan and checking off everything on the list. Are you all like that? Pretty much? You're in the right job then. Terrific. Well, I thought I would just share a couple things about our company, just so you would have a little bit of context for some of the comments I may make or some of the examples I might give. So we are down in Royal Oak, and we are really experts in training and performance support. So when I say performance support, I mean things like a job aid, or online help, or maybe a decision tree, things that as a person help you do your job better, but maybe not formal training. We serve mid-size and large-size organizations across a number of industries, so banking and healthcare and home improvement and medical device. And really what we care about is helping employees do their jobs better. So in other words, so they're performing better on the job and they can get to business results for their organization. Training's a great thing, but training's only a great thing if it's the right solution. And if that training helps you improve your skills and knowledge and gets you to improve performance and gets you to improve business results. So I'm not going to read all these, but in a nutshell, these are our services. And to keep it real simple, basically what we do is we write training materials, or we build training. So it might be classroom training, it might be e-learning, it might be a webinar, it might be job aids, and more what we're doing is mobile. All right, what you see on the screen now are two projects, Project A and Project B. So I want you to take just a minute and read both projects, and then I'm going to ask for a show of hands which project you'd rather be a part of. All right, I see a lot of speed readers here. How many for Project A? No, okay. How many for Project B? Oh, good answer. I don't know about you, right, but when the alarm clock gets up every morning and I'm going to think about coming to work, I want to work on a great project. And I think you'd all agree that Project B sounds a whole lot better to be a part of than Project A, huh? Yeah. Okay. So that's a nice segue for our topic today, because I think in order to have more projects like Project B and fewer like Project A, we really need to drive the project forward. And thus, the topic of today. So if you saw on the slide, the driver was driving the project forward, and I really believe it's the project manager's role to do this. And a project manager is not going to do this just by thinking about it, right? You can't just think about it. You have to take some specific actions that are going to increase the likelihood that we have more like B instead of like A. So find those actions or those specific behaviors and then be able to do them consistently. Also, too, given what we do as a company, given that we do training and performance support as a company, the examples I'm going to use are probably going to be about training, and I think that's something that we can all relate to. So I think it's best that we think about actions or behaviors tied to a process. I think it makes it easier, it gives us some grounding. So given that I assumed you all manage different types of projects, I thought I would just kind of create a real generic process. So if we think about a generic process, I think we can all relate to a process that might have some kind of scoping, some kind of project kickoff. How do you like this? Middle. I figured every project has a middle, right? And then we're all happy, right, when a project has an end. So I thought we would go through each of these just generic phases and talk about what some of the things you're doing as a project manager to drive. So in our scoping phase, I think a real key document to put in place is a project plan, all right? So what is a project plan? This is something that goes by a lot of names, right? You might have heard it called a scoping document, or a statement of work, or a proposal, or a charter. What do you all call it? A project plan. Excellent. Okay. A schedule. So really, it's a way to just get down. And when I say get down, I mean in writing, because I think the in writing part's pretty important, because that way it's kind of not left up to interpretation. So what it is, it's just a document that you've written down. And again, we're right, the project hasn't even kicked off. We're very early in the project. And it's just a place to write down what you know now. What's your current understanding of, why you're doing this project, what the purpose of the project is. So it's a place to just write it down in one place. So why is it important to write this down? Like I said, it puts it in writing. I think it sets forth the expectations. It gives you kind of a shared understanding of what you're all setting off to do. It's a great document then to use in our next phase when we kick off the work with our team. And I think it's a good thing, it's a good document to come back to if you, hit a bump in the road. Do you ever have that happen with a project? And I think it's a way, because of that, it just gives you a little bit of a way to get grounded. So what's in this document? It shows here key elements. And for me, this is like your table of contents almost. So you might start out with your project purpose, kind of the what and the why. We're doing this in order to this, okay? Some kind of background. What's happening already? What's happened to date? Why are we here? How did we get to here is what's in that background. The evidence of success. So at the end of the project, how will we know if we got to where we were supposed to be getting, right? If you're driving to California, did you know you were driving to California, and that's how you know you got there. So what does success look like? How will we know if we did what we set out to do? Deliverables are what I just call tangible assets, the things, the stuff, the documents that you have along the way, interim deliverables, and then at the end of the project. Approach is what I consider the step-by-step. It's your process. Step 1, turn off the alarm clock. Step 2, press the button on the coffee. Step 3, jump in the shower. Just that step-by-step. So you can really see the how, right? The how is the work going to get done. The schedule then is really that timeline. And so what we like to do is put the timeline against that approach or process. You've thought in detail the how, the step-by-step, and then the schedule part is just adding some timing to that. Finally, the team. The team is a lot about roles and responsibilities. What are the right folks? We always say on a team, it's good to have the smallest, rightest team. So it's being clear about who those folks are that are on the team, and real clear about their macro role, and then almost bullet out, bullet by bullet, what are their responsibilities. Budget and assumptions. So, sometimes you're on a project, you don't have to worry about the budget. It's more about the schedule and getting done. Other times, do you all have budget responsibility as well?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's important to share kind of the overall budget so the team understands it. It's important to think about how much time is allocated to each person. It's important to think about how you're going to track that budget. It's important to think about, what's going to be included in the budget and what's not included in the budget. So that's the scoping. So once we have an initial understanding, now you never know everything. Right? Some of the analytical nature of all of us as project managers, and we all have a little bit of that wanting perfection as project managers. You want to wait and figure everything out before you start the project, right? But you can't, or the projects would never get done. So at some point we have to go ahead and just kick off the project. So this is what we said was the next phase in our generic process. So what is this? This is really just a way to get a project off to a terrific start. And I like to do it with having some kind of kickoff meeting or start of work meeting. Do you have something you call similar? What do you call it? Kickoff. Okay, perfect. So what is it? It's just a gathering. And again, what's important is having the right people there. So anybody that's going to touch this project that needs to understand, why we're doing this project, what we're hoping to accomplish, what success looks like. If I have a role or if I'm a stakeholder, what is that role I'm expected to play and what am I supposed to do along the way? It can be in the same room. It can certainly be virtual. Might be an hour or two. Could be all day. Could be a series of kickoff meetings, kind of depending on the scope and the complexity of your given initiative. Okay, so we've scoped the project, we've kicked it off, and now we're in the middle. So this is when the work is getting done. So I think you'd agree a key thing about driving a project forward is to drive the schedule itself forward. And of course, in order to drive the schedule forward, first you're going to have to create it. So there's lots of ways to create project schedules. And some of that, I think, depends on the rigor of the project and the complexity of the project. But when at all possible, I love to do just a simple 3-column Microsoft Word schedule with the 3 columns that you see on the screen. So the step, the who, and the when. The step is really the task or the what. And I think the importance of the step is to get at the right level of detail. Do you find that? If you have a step that's turn on computer, probably too detailed, right? Too micro of a step. But on the other hand, for us, if our step was just build training materials, that's much too broad, right? Because what you want is you want that step to guide or drive the behavior of the people on the team and make it clear. What's important, we find with a step, is to make sure you start with an actionable verb, a verb that I can see and watch and observe. So a verb like conduct meeting, or write document, okay? So a verb that really describes what's happening. You can't just put a noun there, or I don't know what's happening with the noun. You can't just say meeting, because what about the meeting? Am I preparing for the meeting? Am I conducting the meeting? Am I debriefing the meeting? So the verb is going to be real important. Next is the who. And again, what's important about the who column? And finally, the when column is that schedule piece, or the deadline piece. There's a few things you can do with this column. You can put by when. So in other words, by when does the task need to be completed? Kind of the deadline. Often, though, you might want to put a range, the starting date and the ending date. Because sometimes, person B can't start their task until person A finishes their task, if that makes sense. So once you have your baseline project schedule in place, right, and this is probably what you were able to put in place partially in that project plan, and then you keep the schedule up to date, right? That's the next key, is to keep the schedule up to date. I don't know about you, but I'm not on too many projects where I write the schedule once at the beginning and it stays for the whole project. Do you all have those kinds of projects? Not too many? A few, I hope, though, so you have those kind of career highlights. So what's going to be important to drive this project forward is that when there is a change to the schedule, that you do go back and update the schedule. And you can't just update it on your own computer. What else do you have to do? You have to share it. You have to get it out. You have to put the new version on your SharePoint or in your Drive or on the network, or you have to email it to everybody. And what's important, especially if you have a real rigorous schedule with lines and lines, it's important to share with your team what's changed. Don't make your team study row by row by row to figure out, oh, my task changed, or nope, nothing changed that affected me. So either sometimes I highlight it in a different color, or sometimes I do a quick email that says, you know, the only thing I changed was X and Y. You can ignore everything else. Okay, so it's important to create a darn good schedule, and then it's important to make sure you maintain it and keep communicating it out with your team. Well, I think that was a nice segue, because I think an important part of the project manager's job, too, is to look ahead. To look ahead and drive to what's coming next, right? Because what about your team members? Your team members are heads down doing their task. They're not worried about, you know, what's coming next. It's important to understand, you know, okay, we are here, right? Tomorrow, what's happening tomorrow? Are we ready? You know, do we have our act together for tomorrow? What's happening next week? What do we need to do to get ready for next week? Next month, what's happening next month? So it's really up to that project manager to, you know, at the beginning of every day, the beginning of every week, do we have the right people? Do those people know they're on tap to work on this project? Do we have the right equipment? Do we have the right materials? Do we have the right decisions? So speaking of, you know, contingencies, sometimes we can't start or do our part of the task until we, you know, somebody decided, are we going left or are we going right? So sometimes a decision is that input in order to be able to start. And I think to your point, what happens is you get closer and closer, you know, to the next phase or the next set of tasks. You're getting more clarity, you're getting more detail. You obviously know what's happened to date and how that's going to influence it. All right, so this is a graphic that our graphic designer believed that depicted urgency. Urgency. So I think it's important that as a project manager, you demonstrate some urgency. In other words, you know, don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today, right? I'm sure we've all known people in our careers. I'll just, for simplicity's sake, put them in two buckets, okay? You know how a meeting sometimes wraps up at 4:30 and, you know, somebody might say, oh, you know, that's great, it's 4:30, you know, I'll get to that later in the week. I'll make sure I, you know, touch base with Sue later in the week. All right, so that's one category of person. There's the other category of person that's like, oh, cool, it's only 4:30, they get on their gadget or on their laptop, they're sending 3 instant messages and 2 voicemails, right? They're immediately taking action. Do you see the difference in the urgency? Or some people will say, oh, you know, it's 4:30, oh, I'm in meetings all day tomorrow, and then the next morning I have meetings, and then, you know, lunch, you know, and so it'll clearly be, you know, after lunch, right? And again, that other person's, it's 4:30, they're leaving a couple messages on their way home. Already the next morning, they've left a couple messages from home before they've even gotten in the car and driven to work. Do you see the difference in the urgency? And I think what happens is often team members take on that flavor. They kind of mirror the pace. Now, I'm not saying go 90 miles an hour if you don't need to, but I'm sure we've all been on projects where that sense of urgency is pretty important. The graphic here, I think, depicts another really important thing that as project managers we must do to drive the project forward. Well, can you see what's happening here? What would you call this? A handoff. Yep. A handoff. I talked to the graphic designer about showing runners, you know, in a relay race, handing off the baton, and she was creative enough to come up with a more work-related kind of handoff. It's so important, and so often I find where projects get tripped up is at the handoffs. You know, the before and the after. So let's assume here that Bob's hand is receiving the input, or Bob is receiving the task, right? So let's say this handoff is supposed to happen in the middle of the day, right? So as the good project manager, shortly after lunch, I go to Bob. I say, hey Bob, how's it going? You know, are you working on the task? And Bob says, oh, on what? On what task? I said, oh, you know, did you get the writing? In training materials, when we do e-learning, first we write storyboards, and then we program the storyboards. So let's say Bob's the programmer. I say, well, you know, did you get the storyboards? Oh, no. And I say, oh, well, did you ask Mary when you're going to get the storyboards? And Bob says, well, no, I didn't want to bug her. I figured she'd get them to me when she was done with them. Right? Have you ever had that happen? So, right, so you go find Mary, and Mary, how are those storyboards going? And, you know, she gives you that look. Oh, you know what? My boss, he got me on something different, and I've been working on the XYZ project. And you say, oh, well, were you going to tell me or tell Bob? Well, you know, when my boss wants something, that's the priority. Right? So what's happened here? All these things happen, right? Priorities change and whatnot, but what's the real problem? No communication, right? No communication from Mary saying, you know, I got pulled on to something else. Bob's, you know, what's Bob doing? Probably has another project or probably has some research to do, but Bob's probably getting behind now in the schedule. So what's going to be important for you as the project manager is, again, it's part of that looking ahead thing. You know, it's the day before Mary has a task due. It's the morning Mary has a task due. Hey Mary, how are you doing on that? Right? It's the checking in. Okay? And then it's talking with your team. Hey, it's not annoying. You're not bugging somebody to just ask a simple question. Hey, are you on track, Mary? Are you gonna give me the storyboard so I can start programming right after lunch? You know, we're 5 minutes past 1. Hey, Mary, it's Bob. I'm waiting for those storyboards. How you coming on those? So right away we're nipping it. You know, we're not waiting till the next morning to find out that we're a little bit off. So work really hard at doing those handoffs. So here we do have our runner example. And this is about what you're doing as a project manager during the task. All right? So let's say Bob is doing the task now. Hard at work doing the task. He has 3 days to do the task. So what are you doing as the project manager or the coach or the friend of the person running? You're doing a few of these things, right? Do you need a drink? What's that about? Do you need anything? Can I get you something? I love that. Is anything in the way? That's just as important to ask for. You know, are you running into some problems? Are you encountering some obstacles? Right? On the right, your split time is 59 seconds. Bob's 10 yards behind you. What are you doing? You're sharing a little bit of information. You're providing an update. You know, as the project manager, you're looking out. You know what's going on over here and over here and over here. The person often doing the task is kind of heads down. So you're privy to some information that will be helpful. I always think as a project manager, I call them informing skills. It's really important though, how much do I need to tell Bob? I don't need to tell Bob everything under the sun about this project. I just need to tell Bob the targeted things that are relevant to him in a real succinct, clear, actionable manner. So I'm just sharing any information that might be helpful to Bob. In the lower left corner, go, you can do it. What are we doing here? Little praise, little motivation. You can do it. Let's go, we're on track, this team's jamming, we're doing a great job. So that always, I know that always feels good when somebody does that for me. And I think if we listed a whole list of, you know, skills and competencies and personality traits for project managers, the cheerleader is a pretty important one, or whatever word you want to use that. So again, I can't say how important it is to be checking in, right? Because I think we've all had experiences when you check in and the person says, oh, I haven't started the task yet. You know, I have plenty of time, right? You go, when are you going to start the task, right? Or they're not concerned. You know, I know I'm behind, but I'll catch up. It's like, oh, how are you going to catch up? I often, you know, sometimes you have to get real detailed and real literal. I'll say, you know what, we have 2 weeks. We're about a week into it. Do you feel like you're halfway through the work? You know, be real concrete, because I think otherwise people just kind of look at the task kind of like this. They don't say to themselves, oh, I had 2 weeks to do the task. You know, maybe the task only takes 8 days, and I have 10 days. But still, you know, it's day 5 on the calendar. If I've only done, you know, 2 days of the work, right, I'm probably going to be in trouble. So it's the checking in, it's asking some real concrete questions, because I see these whole conversations happen. Hey, how's it going? Oh, good. Yep, is everything on track? Yep, everything's good. You have what you need? Yep, I have everything I need. And then all of a sudden we're missing the deadline. Okay, so we had communication. It just wasn't, you know, quality communication. All right. Sometimes you check in and people just have completely lost track of the deadline, right? Completely into something else and have completely forgotten that they were switching from this activity to this activity and moving on. Okay, we've talked a lot about driving the schedule. Let's talk a little bit about driving the budget. So just like with the schedule, first you had to create it, and then you had to drive it. So with the same thing with a budget. First you have to create it, okay? In other words, what's our baseline going to be? You probably have a way to do it. We use, I was going to say simple, but it's really not simple. It's a pretty rigorous and detailed way of quoting, where we almost look, you know, quarter hour by quarter hour, what's each role, or what's each person doing on the project. The first thing you need to understand is what's included in your budget. You all talk about lots about that you're managing pieces of projects, or you know, somebody else has this project and you have this project. So what's included in your project from a budget standpoint? You know, did Toya have to worry about that this room, reserving the room today was against her cost center? Did she have to worry about the snacks at the back of the room were included? Did she have to include the cost of your hourly rate all not being on the job per se today? Or did she just need to worry about, you know, the flip chart and the podium? So what's included in your budget is what you need to know. Then what we like to do is almost on the top part is just some header information, name of the project, etc. What we like to then on the left side is where we put our process. And then the columns further over, we just put each person that's on the project. And then we put a length of time, 1 hour, 10 hours, in each cell for the task. And then at the bottom of the spreadsheet, if you need to, it calculates a dollar rate instead of the hours, and it can give you your whole project. So you're going to map out your budget. You're going to make sure you share those budget expectations with your team. You're going to make sure your team knows how to track. What are they supposed to do? Are they just supposed to scribble how much time they spent on your project on a notepad? Do they put it into an Excel spreadsheet? Do you have some you know, more software application that tracks, does your budget tracking? However it is, you need to make sure your team, you know, garbage in, garbage out. So you need to make sure you give that real clear direction to your team, just so they know how to track the budget. So again, as project managers, we want to create that baseline. We want to communicate to our team what the expectations are around the budget. And then, you know, occasionally we need to look at the budget, right?
She looks worried.
She's analyzing. She's
Oh, okay.
deep at work analyzing. So, yeah, absolutely. So she's analyzing the budget, and hopefully what she's done is pick some milestones or key places along the way to analyze that budget. So this is going to vary depending on the pace and the complexity of your project. You know, maybe the project's going so fast and you have 200 resources, you're looking at the budget every day. Maybe it's a once-a-week task. Maybe it's a once-a-month task, right? But you're not waiting till the end of the project, perhaps, and then having some surprises, right? So what happens? You look at your budget and it's off, you know? But so when you find that your budget is off, it's a sign. It's a sign that says, hey, something's not right. It's not a just, oh well, I'll keep going. It's a sign that you need to, right, do a little bit of root cause analysis. Because there's lots of different things that could be wrong. And just like any root cause analysis, if you don't figure out the right root cause, you're going to put the wrong solution in place. So it could be all sorts of things, right? We talked about scope. It could be the team really wasn't clear on the scope. There was some confusion, and, you know, not by any fault of their own, they were just confused, and they really are doing some things that are out of scope. It might be that you have people on your team that are not skilled enough, so it's taking them longer to do the task. And the schedule and the budget was based on people performing at appropriate performance and skill levels. So it might be that you've uncovered somebody that has a skill challenge. It might be that the scope really has changed. Okay, something legitimately has changed, and there's been some agreements about what's changed. So that's when, as a project manager, it's going to be important to take action, right? I think another thing that's pretty important is checking in with that stakeholder, okay? And having some kind of regular touch base to check in with your stakeholder. And one of the things you're doing is you're just asking, you know, how's it going? Is there anything I should be aware of? How often, right, when you ask that simple question, or you run into maybe you run into the stakeholder in the hall or something, and you're like, whew, I'm sure glad I found that. I'm sure glad I stumbled upon that. Wow, imagine if I hadn't known that. So I think it's important that you have some kind of regular touch base where you can be more proactive about asking, hey, what's going on? Is there anything I should know about? I think it's important, too, with stakeholders to show them some of the key outputs. You know, it's one thing to talk conceptually, the project's moving along, we're creating A and B and C, but I think it's pretty important that you're showing them, you know, they're not going to look at 10 tons of detail, right? But there should be key documents that you've even identified in your project plan where you're going to have a kind of a formal review and sign off. Okay? So keep those stakeholders in the loop. Okay, this was our segue from earlier, that occasionally, I don't know about you, but occasionally there's a few hiccups that come about on the way, right? So what's important that we do? First, that we take a deep breath, and we become our most flexible, open-minded self, right? Because as project managers, aren't we all a little bit more on the rigorous side and like to be structured and like to be in control, right? So when problems come up, it's always kind of a whack on the head. So before you react, take that deep breath. Maybe say to yourself, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen with this change? And then go about doing some problem solving, right? Sometimes the first step is to figure out if you need to stop anything. Right? Do I need to turn off the valve? Do I need to close the bank? Do I need to tell John to stop his task? So first is, I think in formal problem solving, they call it the container step, containerization. What do you need to do? Is there anything you need to do to stop? Then you need to do your problem solving and your brainstorming, and you probably need to get some other folks involved. You need to focus in, right, on the best solution. And what about when you have a new solution then? We need to update the schedule. We need to update the budget. We need to communicate that new schedule and that new budget. We need to, the whole time, right, be optimistic, be can-do. Because if you're doom and gloom and stressed and flying off the handle, how's the team going to feel? Probably similar, right? Again, it's like with that urgency thing, they're going to mirror you a little bit. So again, you're going to be confident, you're going to be can-do, you're going to get everybody on track, and everybody's feeling better, and the project is back on track. A place where we see, because we write a lot of documents. At the end of the day, we write a lot of documents, and you write it, and you review it, and you write it, and review it, and you write it, and redo it. So often we see that places where things get off track are with meetings and with review cycles. What about with a review cycle? So when I say a review cycle, I mean you're working through a 100-page document. What's important about that? So you send out the document and you ask people to review it. Something that's really important is to tell them what to review for. You know, when we do multiple drafts, at the first draft, you're reviewing for content and accuracy, for example. You know, I don't need you to review for commas and periods and formatting of the bullets, okay? So as a project manager, it's good to be real clear about what you're reviewing for and what you're not reviewing for, okay? Sometimes I tell people how long they should plan for their review. You know, it's a 100-page document, you should probably plan about 8 hours for your review. Because some people haven't kind of done all that mental gyration in their head. So give them a little planning. What's going to be then as a team? What's going to be your consequence if people haven't reviewed the document? You know, you get to the meeting, you're going to have a discussion about the document, and people haven't reviewed it. What have you agreed upon as a team? Sometimes we have meetings and we read out loud. Or everybody take 30 seconds and read this page, and then we talk about it. Or, you snooze, you lose. If you didn't review it, I'm sorry, we're moving on, and you've lost your opportunity to give input here. So you just want to be clear about what the consequences are and manage that. Because again, that's really key to moving that project along. All right, we've been in the middle of the project for a while, now we're at the end of the project. And there's a couple, as much as the project manager, you'd like to just turn off the lights, right, and go home. Your organization, if you think about it, has spent a lot of time and energy and money probably on doing this initiative. So there's a couple of things that I think are real important as the project manager to drive the project just to some good closure for your organization. And one is certainly, you see there, is having a debrief meeting. What went well? What didn't go so well? What might we do different next time? And then figuring out, do you have a way to document that? To keep that institutional knowledge. Do you keep lessons learned in a database or somewhere in your project history?
Yes.
Yes, excellent, fantastic, that's a best practice. And then I think what we use is a project close list, because there's a whole list of, there's some psychological things about project closure. Did you pat everybody on the back? Did you have a celebration? And then there's some real logistical things too. Did we shred confidential documents? Did we archive things? Did we get all the source files in the same place? Did we put it out on the intranet? What a success the project was. So did we let the organization know that we, had this huge initiative that, came through the organization like a whirlwind? Hey, it was successful. This is what we accomplished. This is why we did it. So almost a little bit of marketing of what you're doing. So as much as you'd like to just turn off the lights and go home, make sure you do a real good debrief and document some of what you've learned, and make sure you actually have some kind of checklist in your project manager toolkit to make sure you've really brought closure to that project. And often there's, you need to maintain some things. And often that gets handed off to a different team to maintain. So the better you do a closing down, and doing a good job of closing down that project, the better it's going to be for the team that takes over. So that's the end of my formal part of the presentation.